Welcome to TEDxYouth at LCJSMS 2017, Going Beyond.
Blood, blood, and more blood, gushing out of his body as if he was a piñata. The man struggles to stay alive, but can't, because the boat he is on gets demolished by a huge great white shark. Red liquid starts to come out of his mouth as he finally drifts to the bottom of the ocean. Jaws, the movie that many call the best of all time, almost ruined my life forever. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this was a great movie, and I think it's pretty great too, but it probably wouldn't have been a good idea to show this to a tiny, imaginative 6-year-old boy. That boy was me. From then on, sharks were my worst nightmare. And finally, after 8 years, I decided I was going to overcome this fear. But before I could figure out how to make my fear disappear, I needed to understand how my mind processes it. So fear goes through something called our limbic system, which is what takes in all our emotions, including fear. But it all starts with something called the stimulus. The stimulus is what makes you scared. So let's just say you're afraid of spiders. When you see a spider at the zoo, the sensory data you take in is sent directly to the thalamus. The thalamus is like a traffic cop for your brain because it takes in the sensory information and puts it down 2 roads. Let's start with road number 1, also known as the messy road. With this road, our minds don't know if the signals it's getting are a danger or not. But since the answer isn't a definite no, it sends the information directly to the amygdala to fast track the fight or flight response. The amygdala tells the hypothalamus to turn on the fight or flight response and release the hormones, and we experience fear. So that's road number 1. But at the same time, road number 2 is going through our mind, which is the considering all the options road. From here, instead of fast tracking the fight or flight response turn on, we go from the thalamus to the sensory cortex, where it determines, oh, there's more than one way to interpret this data. It might not be bad. But the sensory cortex doesn't figure out exactly what's going on, so it asks the hippocampus for help. The hippocampus is probably the most important part of the brain. It uses the memories that we've had and asks questions to help us get over our fear or figure out if it's a danger or not. So in this situation, when we're looking at a spider in the zoo, the hippocampus would ask, where is the spider? Can it get to us? And since the answer is no, it tells the amygdala and the hypothalamus to turn off the fight or flight response. See, both of these are happening at the exact same time. But since the high road or the second road is slower, we have a moment of pure anxiety and terror before we finally calm ourselves down. So now you understand how we process fear, but why should you care? You're probably thinking in your head, this kid doesn't know what he's doing, this doesn't apply to me, he probably can't even do his own laundry. Well, you're wrong, although your assumption about the laundry sadly isn't. Thanks, Mom. See, fear can cause damage to our cardiovascular and our immune systems. So unless you like not having a heart beating or getting sick all the time, getting over your fears matters. But even more importantly, fear can cause damage to our hippocampus, which, as I said, holds all of our most precious memories, including when our children were born, or our wedding, or even an important talk that we said. But seriously, hearing what my fear could do to me was really scary, and I knew I needed to take action right away. So first I looked to military officers, as they have to deal with life and death situations all the time. They had to have some tactics that they used to push down the fear and pull up the courage. I found that they used laughter and self-motivation. We're all used to that voice who talks in the back of our heads. We're all also used to the fact that this voice is kind of horrible. It'd be great to have an inner motivational speaker telling us we're great and everything's going to be fine. But more often than not, this guy's telling us we're horrible and we're doing bad. This is a real thing. In times of stress, our brains create talk that can dramatically increase our feelings of fear. Our minds, soldiers, fight back against this by repeating words like faster so that they can go faster. I mean, you can do the same thing in your everyday life. Right now, I'm doing it during this speech. In my mind, I'm saying, keep moving forward. So if I mess up, the keep moving forward is always right there to fight back against that voice. So what else did military officers use? Laughter. It's so simple. Anybody can do it. Laughter lets SEAL Platoon James Walters know that everything's going to be okay and it's all going to work out. And a Stanford study revealed that people who were told to laugh when they saw disturbing images did much better and had a much healthier reaction than people who weren't given the chance. I realized I'd subconsciously used this technique when I went with my friends to a horror movie. Believe me, I hate horror movies. I almost hate it as much as I hate sharks. But they convinced me, and I almost had to be shoved into the theater. But once we were in there, we were cracking jokes about the plot here and there, and we were all laughing. The horror movie turned out to be a comedy. Now, I learned what military officers could do, but I skipped over the most important person who could help me. Psychologists. They have to deal with patients who need to overcome their fears all the time, and many of them have a multitude of ways of helping their patients do this. But the way that all of them had a common thread was to gradually push my comfort zone until I finally overcame my fear. So that's exactly what I decided to do. I started out with just an easy task for myself, just looking at some videos of people shark diving. Pretty simple, just go on YouTube and watch some. In only a couple of days, I was completely fine with this and moved on to my next step, which was having a remote-controlled flying shark in my house. Yes, this is supposed to be a fun toy, and look at that kid right there. He's having a great time. But believe me when I say this was no fun at all. I woke up in the third morning to have it floating right above my bed, and it's not very fun to have a 5-foot object right above your head. I almost had a heart attack. But by the end of the week, I walked in the door from getting home from school, and I greeted it as it was just some normal thing to have in my house. Okay, now I overcame my fear of the helium shark, but real ones, So I knew I needed to go to Long Island Aquarium in Riverhead, New York to overcome my fear. First, I started at the shark tank. I started outside, and I stood maybe about 10 feet away. Then, as time moved forward, I slowly inched myself forward until I got to the glass. Then, I was on my second to last step, which was now, I knew I needed to do some type of touch exhibit. So I went to the shark touch tank, and I just dipped my hand in the water. Again, as time passed, I slowly made my way to the shark's back, the tiger shark, and just slightly rubbed it. Then I got into a little bit more comfortable rubbing. So after this, I couldn't do anything else other than my last step, which was jumping in a tank with these sharks. Yes, I know, it's crazy. I definitely did not want to do it, but I knew it was the only thing I could do to fully overcome my fear of sharks. I put on a wetsuit and an oxygen mask, and I timidly dropped in. And as the bubbles started to lift, oh my, a huge shark just glided past my face. I wanted to scream every curse word imaginable, and I would have if it weren't for the microphones in the mask. So I kept it PG with the holy molies and the oh my goshes. But at around the 5-minute mark, I was finally calmed down. My hands started to let go, and I was actually breathing at a normal pace. At this point, I knew my fear of sharks was finally gone, because my hippocampus must have remembered me touching the sharks, me having the helium shark in my house, and me looking through the shark tank. I was so happy that my fear of sharks was finally gone. Now I want you to think about your fear. You don't have to say it, just think. I mean, it might be a little bit embarrassing for you. Now, use this fear and think of one way that you could gradually overcome it. Execute this, and you just made your first stride toward fully overcoming your fear. I believe in you, and you should believe in yourself, because if I, a 14-year-old kid who could barely make his own peanut butter and jelly sandwich, can overcome my fear of sharks, why can't you? Thank you.